Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and it is a game week for the Minnesota Vikings. So I've returned from the Vikings locker room where we had a really good chat with Aaron Jones that I want to talk a lot about. We have some updates from practice as far as injuries go. They don't have to put out an official injury report until Wednesday, but did make a significant observation today. Plus, the Vikings lost Jaren Hall. We'll talk about that. And a football power index, maybe that the Vikings don't want to see. And it's 7:30, so about a half hour from now, Manny Hill will return to the show, and Manny and I will be back in hot routes mode. And just to preview that, we're just going to talk about what we're excited for football. That is going to be the whole conversation for an hour with myself and Manny Hill. And of course, I want you guys very much involved as well. Your questions, your comments, your thoughts, we will be answering them all throughout the next hour and a half or so. So we are back. Once Manny arrives on the scene for a weekly basis to Mondays and Thursday nights live on YouTube, you know that football season is here. So let's start with my notes from TCO Performance Center and the Vikings today, and then we'll get to Manny in a little bit. And if you got some questions or comments, throw them in the box. I'll start answering them, and then when Manny comes in, we'll all have a good conversation. So let's jump right into it. Jordan Addison was at practice today. That does not mean he's locked dead in 100% to play this week. It just means that Jordan Addison was at practice today. He did not look like he was doing a lot, but when the season starts, we don't watch the whole practice anymore. As reporters, we go out for the warm-up section and the individual drills, and then we go back inside. They practice because they're doing their game planning, everything else. It's only open to the team during practice. So I can't tell you how much Jordan Addison was able to do. And since the official injury report doesn't come out until Wednesday, that we're not sure about whether he's going to be listed as limited or a full participant in practice. But what you can say is the fact that he had a uniform on and pants and he was doing stretching is a very good sign for Jordan Addison toward potentially playing in week 1 against the New York Giants. And if he were to have the ankle injury and not miss any time at all, that would be a big win for the Vikings that have not gotten many good injury updates throughout this training camp. But in this case, it would be a very good one for Jordan Addison. So a plus sign for him potentially toward playing in week 1 to be out on the practice field today. On the negative side for the Vikings from practice, Jalen Nailor was working out off to the side, so he was not looking like he was going to participate in practice. And Jalen Nailor, with his injury history, certainly makes you raise an eyebrow at that, because if it was somebody else, you might say, all right, well, let's see on Wednesday. Let's not talk too much about this, because sometimes guys need a day off when they're banged up or they tweak something or whatever. But with Jalen Nailor, this is always the concern, is with his injuries and his potential availability. Not sounding the alarm yet. Wednesday will tell us a lot more toward Jalen Nailor's status, and we haven't heard anything that would indicate so far that he won't be able to play. But the fact that he was not looking like he was working with the rest of the group, a little bit concerning, something to keep an eye on with Jalen Nailor. But I also think that this year is going to be, just in general, different from a wide receiver 3 perspective, because in the past, the most recent past, it was KJ Osborne's job. It was just all KJ Osborne. And he was wide receiver 3. We didn't see too many other people mixing in. And that's over the last 3 seasons. But now they have other guys that are going to mix in, I think, for different roles. So somebody like Trent Sherfield, I would guess that he's going to be someone who's out there at times when they want to run the football a little bit more. Brandon Powell is an underneath wide receiver 3 type. And if Jalen Nailor cannot play, then you might see a little more of Tristan Jackson, who's a similar type of downfield, maybe a third down and long type receiver that you're throwing in there. And I also feel like they're going to use a lot of 2 tight ends with Josh Oliver and Johnny Munt, and they want either to have that advantage of the opposing team in nickel when they're in their big personnel, or they want to have opportunities to throw the ball out of that big personnel if the other team goes with their multiple linebackers. They have 3 linebackers out there in more of a base package. And it's not just going to be, hey, it's Jalen Nailor's job. He's wide receiver 3. He's going to get 80 targets. I never thought it would be that way. But after a very good training camp, you want Nailor to carry on with that, especially being a downfield threat that he is. So that's something to very much keep an eye on for Wednesday when we go back out there for their next practice. And that's when they will release the injury report. So we get an idea of Nailor's chances to play at that point. We talked to Aaron Jones today. Always a pleasure to talk to Aaron Jones. One of the best guys in front of the cameras and microphones that you're going to find as a veteran player. And he went into great detail about signing with the Vikings and how from the outset of the moment that he signed with them, he said they gave him cards with plans for making sure that he could stay as healthy as possible. And he really wanted that to go to a team that he felt like was going to work with his body that is on the older side. He's aware of the running back curve, and he named off a bunch of running backs from the past, even going back to Emmitt Smith, who had beaten the age curve. So that is on Aaron Jones's mind, and he's aware of it. But he called it prehab, doing things to try to make sure that he was going to be in the best possible shape. And he said he feels like he's in his prime, which last year, the last 5 games of the season certainly looked like it. And we asked him what was the difference between those last 5 games. And he said he was 100%. And when he's at 100%, that's what Aaron Jones looks like playing football. And I thought that was really something notable when he was talking about them having a plan versus he didn't want to say the Packers didn't have a plan for him physically. But he also mentioned just his usage during training camp and how it was somewhat limited. He didn't practice a whole heck of a lot, didn't play in the preseason games for good reason, because you want to have him play for 17 games. So, I mean, I think that the Vikings are trying everything they can here to give Aaron Jones a better chance to play the entire season. And he's going to be entering at close to 100% if he's not 100% at the beginning of the season. And this is an edge that the Vikings can potentially get just by having individual plans for players, and health is such a big deal in the NFL. And so we'll see. I mean, my expectation is still very high for Aaron Jones. He came across as incredibly confident in where his body is. I think it was also Adrian Peterson who once upon a time predicted he would play another 10 years or something in the NFL, but Aaron Jones said he wants to play another 8 years in the NFL. I don't know about that. That might be one of the oldest running backs we've ever had in the NFL if that's the case. But just from the way that he was discussing it with us, it seems that Aaron Jones feels very good about where his body is at. And when it comes to that split of carries, having Ty Chandler there, and he also talked about trying to bring Ty Chandler along and somebody that he feels like is very explosive. I think he said he's got the juice, which we've seen before from Ty Chandler. So having those two mix in, maybe it's a 60-40 type of split, could also help get the most out of Aaron Jones. So an interesting conversation with him. And I think he's a real swingman to this season, because if the Vikings can run the football better, and behind the scenes, I'm absolutely certain this has been a major priority for them, because they know that there's going to have to be a little bit of Shanahan-Kubiak style building the passing game off the run, looking for play action deep shots, which get set up by handing the ball to Aaron Jones and get set up by having big personnel at times in the game. But the other team has to be worried that you're going to do something with it. If you don't run successfully, but you have 2 tight ends out there, then you just have 2 guys who aren't that much of a threat to catch the ball down the field. But if you can, as we saw with the Vikings in, say, like 2019, when they had Irv Smith as a rookie and Kyle Rudolph, you saw teams really struggle to deal with Dalvin Cook in the backfield, the play action game off the big personnel. So if you can make it work from a run game perspective, then it can be pretty good. I think that's what they want to do with Aaron Jones. And knowing that there are some limitations compared to Kirk Cousins that Sam Darnold has, he's going to be a big deal for the team this season. All right, Jaren Hall. All of you Jaren Hall fans, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to exchange your jerseys for somebody else. Who took his number? I think Will Reichard. Hey, that's not bad. So if you had the Jaren Hall 16, you could just put some tape over it that says Will Reichard. I'm kidding, but Jaren Hall's a Seahawk, and I'm not sure what went into Jaren Hall's thinking. The Vikings said that they wanted to bring Jaren Hall back, having 4 quarterbacks who, 3 of them know the offense makes sense. They had to use 4 quarterbacks last year, but I think that if you were upset that Jaren Hall is signing somewhere else, I don't know what to tell you. This wasn't somebody who was at all in the mix or the running for a future starting quarterback, and I was pretty skeptical that he could be even a future backup quarterback because he had never really shown that. And even when he was in the preseason game, the last play that he played in preseason, he took a huge hit, and you were concerned that Jaren Hall was never going to be able to play at the speed of the NFL, and that it was going to be potentially dangerous for him to be out there, considering the way he got hurt against the Falcons, the hits he took when he was out there for the Packers. So the best of luck to Jaren Hall in his future, because the way he handled the whole situation was very good. And he was somebody that worked professionally and represented the franchise well and was good in the locker room and all those things. But it's not something you should be worried about. Don't lose any sleep about Jaren Hall signing with another team, because I don't think he was ever in this team's plans, even as the backup quarterback for next season. I just can't see it, because usually that role to go along with JJ McCarthy would have been a proven backup, somebody who started a lot of games. I don't know if it'll be Mullins or someone else, but it will be a veteran. It's not just going to be a guy who has barely played. And when he has, it's been him getting whacked a lot by the opposing team. So again, good for Jaren Hall. Maybe he gets another chance to be a backup somewhere else and develops a little bit more, but a new start for him with the Seattle Seahawks. And have to include this one because it's hot. This is something that we could go on TV and we could yell at each other about. This is one of those debate show topics. ESPN's Football Power Index. That's extra football with more power in a form of an index, simulated the season and found that the Vikings are drafting number 1 overall. I understand why a simulation would come up with something like this, because if you plug in Sam Darnold's past history into a simulation, you would probably not get the greatest results out of that. However, did Sam Darnold's teams even draft number 1 at any point? I mean, I don't even know if that ever happened. He had a 7-win season where he went 7-6 as a starter with the Jets. He went 8-9 with the Carolina Panthers. I mean, I think it's a pretty tough sell to me that a team with this much talent, with Justin Jefferson, and I'm sure that the NFC North is also a factor as well, but with Brian Flores, Kevin O'Connell, the supporting cast, we just talked about Aaron Jones, the offensive line that has 2 very good tackles, an experienced center. There's just way too many good veteran players here to say that they're going to pick number 1. I can get to, well, all right, they are going to miss the playoffs, or they could even have a tough season considering the schedule. But number 1 overall draft pick, I don't know about that Football Power Index. That would take catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe. And well, the Vikings have had that in the past. This franchise has just not been in that position. In order to get there, you have to have everything go wrong. And there is a scenario where it could happen. And that scenario is Nick Mullins. If Sam Darnold were to get hurt and they had to play Nick Mullins over a very extended period of time, over 10 games or something like that, and they had nothing else except for him and Brett Rippon, then I suppose it could happen. That's usually what happens to a team that ends up drafting number one is oftentimes they get their quarterback hurt, or in the case of Carolina that gave their pick to the Chicago Bears, they had drafted a quarterback the year before and he was extremely bad, along with their roster that had been tanking before and had been horrendous. I don't think the Vikings are in that spot. I mean, when you go just through the players that they have on the defensive side, the Grenard, Van Ginkel, Harrison Smith, even Stephon Gilmore had a really good season last year. Last in the league. I mean, we're talking about maybe 3 or 4 wins all season long to get to the number one spot. Just can't see that happening. And some of you were online last night and saw me say, and I'll say it again, that in this scenario, somebody brought up the idea of the Vikings drafting another quarterback. That is not going to happen. From what they saw from J.J. McCarthy, I think that J.J. McCarthy was, had he not torn his meniscus, going to go to Cleveland and make his case for starting in week 1. And if he wasn't going to start in week 1, then it was going to be early in the season. As soon as Sam Darnold hit some stumbling blocks, he was going to start. They loved what they saw from J.J. McCarthy. They believe he is the future franchise quarterback that they're going to build around. That the draft evaluations, whether Shadur Sanders or somebody else, Carson guy from Georgia, whoever is better as a prospect, does not matter, because J.J. McCarthy has done it in a real NFL setting. So no matter where they end up drafting, in fact, if it was that high, if everything went completely to hell and they didn't fire the coaching staff and the general manager, and that would be a thing. If they drafted number 1 and the Wilfs want them to win, then that might be the case, because that's just the nature of the beast. I still wouldn't think that was a good idea, but it might be something that happens if they're that bad. It's going to feel like really, really, really terrible if that ended up being the case. But if that were to happen, then the Vikings could do the trade down, could get a lot of their draft capital back, and then help build around J.J. McCarthy. So there you go. There is no chance whatsoever, zero, that J.J. McCarthy will not be their guy starting for next season. And if you see that anywhere, then I just reject it. Just reject it. What they saw from him was a dream scenario from J.J. McCarthy, and that's just the facts. That's just what was actually happening at TCO Performance Center. I don't know what else is happening on the internet, but that's what was actually going on there. But I don't think that they will draft number 1. I think, and we were talking about this today, because we have these walks from the media center up to the practice field and the media center to the locker rooms. You kind of walk and talk. And we were talking today about like what we all think the record is going to be. Like, what do you think it's going to be? What do you think it's going to be? And it was like 9-8, 9-8, 9-8, 9-8. Everybody kind of thinks it's going to be 9-8, because even teams that have terrible seasons but have a halfway decent coach, the Giants included, I think Dable is a halfway decent coach. Even they finished with 6 last year playing Tommy DeVito. Even the Jets, who I think have a halfway decent coach in Robert Saleh, they won 7 last year, finished 7-10 with playing Zach Wilson. And I think Tim Boyle started a game. The Vikings last year, they started 1-4 and then lost their quarterback midseason, still won 7 games. I just it would have to be so bad. And Darnold would have to be hurt in order for that to happen. And who can ever predict quarterback injuries, as you all know? So that's kind of, I just thought that was something that I saw rolling in the ticker and on the internet as well. I figured I would toss that out there, that I have a really tough time thinking that's going to happen. But then again, maybe no one ever thinks their teams that they cover is going to be the number 1 pick. I don't know. So let me scroll back to the top. I'll start answering some questions. About 10 minutes from now, Manny Hill will join. And we'll keep answering your questions, but also talk about the things we are most pumped about for the Vikings 2024 season, or fascinated by. And I would love to hear yours. What's your number 1 you're most fascinated by, you most want to find out from 2024, Vikings or otherwise? But of course, we'll do a lot of Vikings stuff. 1-16, Chocolate Thunder says, I mean, that's before Zimmer took over 2013. it was about as bad of a season you could have. It was Matt Castle and Christian Ponder, I think, as the quarterbacks, and they ended up with 5. If you have talent and you're trying, usually you end up with at least 5. Let's see. Hamza says, how big of an upgrade do you think Aaron Jones is from Alexander Mattison? Seems like everybody was mentioning how good Jones looked in training camp. Can Jones be a huge difference maker? Absolutely. This is a player who has steamrolled the Vikings in recent years. And you've seen it. I mean, he is powerful, shifty, smart, versatile. This is a superstar running back that the issue is not even how he's played recently. It's just whether he could stay healthy. And if he does, to even some extent, and isn't trying to fight through a bunch of injuries, and they can mix Ty Chandler in there to take a little bit off of his plate, then you are talking about a huge upgrade from Aaron Jones to Alexander Mattison. And I still think that Mattison could have been better than he was last year had they blocked it up and had they had an identity for their run game. I think that that's something that they can't just roll the ball out and say, Aaron Jones, save our butts in the running game. It has to be more well planned than it was last year. And I was a little bit surprised that they didn't make a change at the run game coordinator position, because it just didn't make sense to me watching it. It looked like it didn't fit the blocking of the offensive linemen, like the blocking talents that they have, especially Garrett Bradbury. If you're asking Bradbury to just go straight forward, is that really his thing, or is it moving? Is it getting out? His mobility as a lineman has always been his strength. He put on some weight this year, I guess, but I still think it's his ability to get out and to move, to reach blocks, stuff like that. The tackles are the best players you have. And yet it didn't seem like much was headed toward them on the outsides. So they have to improve schematically, or nobody is going to be able to overcome terrible blocking. But you're talking about a guy who has one of the best yards per carry marks ever. Not just pretty good, but 5 yards a carry is one of the best ever. And last year he was still somewhere around 4.5, 4.6. I think he will be a massive upgrade as long as he continues to play. And that's one of the reasons that talking about them being tremendously bad is just hard to see if you have so much talent with your receivers and in the backfield, and their offensive line at least has strengths to it. Andrew says, I'm willing to wager $1,000 that Sam Darnold's a top 10 statistical quarterback this season. If you give me some odds, I'll even wager thousands that he will be top 5. Okay, Andrew. I don't bet with people aside from milkshakes. So how about a milkshake? What are we talking about statistical? What does statistical mean? I don't think that Sam Darnold's going to be a top 10 statistical quarterback. I don't think he has to be for this team to make the playoffs. I think he's got to be more like top 20 for this team to make the playoffs because of their defense. And if we're talking about PFF grade, are we talking about QBR? Are we talking about quarterback rating? He might not end up with a great quarterback rating because he doesn't complete the highest percentage of his passes. I don't think Sam Darnold is great at the easy stuff all the time. I mean, the check downs, the slant route over the middle, deciding whether he should throw that or not throw that into traffic. Sometimes he waits too long to throw it or doesn't see it the way that he's supposed to see it. For quarterbacks that complete higher percentages like Kirk Cousins, it's usually they're very good with anticipation and accuracy, and that's not really his thing. And quarterback rating usually rewards touchdown passes and completion percentage. Well, I don't know how many touchdown passes he's going to throw, and I certainly don't think he's going to be one of the highest completion percentage quarterbacks. And usually with PFF, the more accurate you are, and sometimes it really rewards conservative quarterbacks that just throw completions. That's one of the big problems with that PFF system. It loved Andy Dalton, I think, with the Saints a couple years ago, because he just took everything underneath, and he didn't really have negative plays, but he didn't really have positive plays. So it said he was pretty good, even though he wasn't moving the needle. Well, with Sam Darnold, the big plays and the big negative plays, sometimes that's going to come out in the wash. Maybe yardage could rack up quite a bit, but I do think that they want to run a lot of play action stuff and build off the run game. So I don't think that he's going to be top 10 statistical quarterback, but I do think that he can be in the top 20 and he can be a quality starter and keep them in a lot of football games. That's a best case scenario. It would be pretty shocking if he turned it around. But if someone else wants to make a bet with you for $1,000, well, I guess they can. Just reach out to Andrew. Oh gosh, says Jaren Hall is the Tyler Thigpen of this generation. He certainly is. Yep, certainly is. Quarterbacks like that, they work hard and they become fan favorites. They have good preseason games. And then you remember after watching one quarter of real action, oh yeah, it's not the preseason. It's not playing against Philly's third stringers. And the game, I think, was just too fast for Jaren Hall when it was really being played out there. And that's probably why the Vikings decided they needed to get somebody else. Zoomer Kev says, I want to vomit every time I hear number 3 wide receiver, to be honest with you. It drives me crazy. It's something that you guys talk about. I feel like we've got a bunch of them. That makes you want to vomit? Wow. So number 3 receiver, here's where I agree with you, is that it can be multiple people. And a lot of times what you have is 2 or 3 wide receivers that do different things. And you use them for different situations. And sometimes you try to throw the other team off by putting in a guy that doesn't usually run block and then running. So the other team thinks, oh, well, this guy's in, he doesn't run block. And then, oh, they ran. Or this guy's just a run blocker. And then there's an example of this, the touchdown that JJ McCarthy threw to Trent Sherfield, where he looks like he's going to block. If you go back and watch that play, he's like, I'm going to block you. And because it's Trent Sherfield, they thought, oh, he must be blocking. And then he just ran by the guy. Wide open, touchdown. That's one of his roles and what he can do. Tristan Jackson's a different guy. Brandon Powell's a different guy. But the point that I'm making with the wide receiver 3 thing is that there clearly was one over the last few years, and that was KJ Osborne. There was no question who the top outside receivers are with Jefferson and Addison last year. And then KJ Osborne is the number 3. You could call them whatever, the XYZ, you could use those, or the flanker and what's the other ones? And nobody ever uses those old terms anymore, but it's not the case now. They need somebody to step up though. And maybe it's Jalen Naylor and maybe it's Trent Sherfield or Tristan Jackson. Someone has to be that guy because that position does get a lot of targets in this offense. Daniel says we need some guard talk. All I can tell you is this, and this is actually quite important, is the Vikings offensive line is healthy. That's a big deal. They don't have any injuries preseason going into the start of the year. And I tend to think that a lot of success or failure on the offensive line has to do with just health. And last year, some of you were shocked when the Vikings had a pretty good PFF grade for pass blocking. Some of that is Josh Oliver's good at it. CJ Ham is good at it, and PFF counts the entire unit. Kirk Cousins wasn't pressured that much, though, and part of it was they had no injuries on that offensive line past, I think, the 3rd week or something, and they were healthy the rest of the way. Ezra Cleveland got banged up, but they wanted Reisner to play anyway, and they were healthy. And that's going to be a big deal for this year because you go one level down. Reisner is on IR currently. Blake Brandel has already been a backup for his career, the backup center, Dan Feeney. You don't want him to play an extended amount of time, but that's a plus coming out of training camp is really you go across the roster and they are mostly healthy outside of the big injuries that they had. JJ McCarthy and Mekhi Blackman. Shaq Griffin back at practice today, looked like he was going to participate fully. So now they have a secondary that's healthy. They have an offensive line that's healthy. And if your starters are playing there, then you're in good shape. And once again, and this is why I've always been for Kevin O'Connell not playing the starters in preseason, is once again, he's coming out of the preseason into week 1 without any real serious injuries other than the ones that happened at total random, the meniscus, the ACL. Aside from that, though, healthy, and we'll see with Jalen Naylor. Angel Dust says over under 15 interceptions for Darnold. I will go under just because it's hard to throw 15 interceptions. Not too many guys throw. I mean, even Darnold in his career hasn't been throwing 15 interceptions a year. Now, if Kevin O'Connell is pushing the gas pedal down and having him throw all the time, then I guess that could be the case. He could end up with 15 or more interceptions. I might go a little bit under that, 12, 13. But you go 15 or higher and you've had a lot of picks at that point. That means you're throwing numerous games of multiple interceptions, and it's going to get pretty rough. But I don't think that's a crazy over-under, though. If he plays all 17 games and he is Sam Darnold, then he's going to play recklessly at times. But I would go a little bit under that, I think. Mike says, is Aaron Jones on the Harrison Smith veteran wellness plan? Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And you'll see this from Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore didn't practice at all until he got here, obviously, at the end of the summer. And now he's just going to play because these veteran guys, they know what they're doing. If you've been around long enough, you know how to pick up on a defense. You know how to keep yourself healthy. Aaron Jones did not need a ton of reps in order to be ready to play for the Vikings. All right, you guys, speaking of ready, you guys ready for this? Here he is. Emmanuel Hill. Manny Hill. What is going on, my friend? Let me put on my headphones so I can hear you. It is Hot Routes time with Manny Hill every Monday and Thursday night. You can keep asking questions, comments, reacting to the things that we're saying. But Manny, I am extremely excited to have you back to talk about the biggest subjects in the National Football League, especially everything Minnesota Vikings. So how are you doing, sir? Great to have you.
It's football season, man. I'm pumped. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I mean, I've already kind of gotten an appetizer with the college football season getting going the last couple of weekends, and now the NFL starting this week. It's a great time to be alive. I love this time of year.
Well, we were just talking, Manny, about the Football Power Index having the Vikings drafting number 1 overall next season. I have a pretty tough time seeing that happen, but I'm just reacting to people's questions, comments. So why don't we have some conversation with the fans here, and then we could talk about things that we're most pumped about. You made a list. I made a list for the Vikings in the 2024 season. Mike says, did you make your official guess at the team record? I'm going with 7-10. Manny, mine is 9-8 is my official record. I'm not changing it from the night that I picked the schedule. Nothing has happened that has changed this roster so significantly. I mean, Mekhi Blackmon is a starter who got hurt. They brought in Gilmore. But aside from that, they're running out the whole team that I thought that they would be running out. And I think that they can get to that 500 mark with this team. What do you think? What's your official Vikings record prediction?
Yeah, I was kind of on that fence of like an 8-9, 9-8 type of season if everybody can, I think, stay healthy. And I think if what we expect to see out of this defense, I think this is a defense that showed a lot of improvement last year under Brian Flores. And I think with the additions that they made in free agency, I think we should see a defense that's even better. And, maybe hopefully everybody stays healthy enough down the stretch of the season where they're not, we're not seeing a lot of big plays given up like we saw late in the season last year that kind of hurt them when they started going up against some better quarterbacks late in the year. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to see how this defense turns out. And I think with the guys that they brought in, it should be improved from last year. And man, Sam Darnold, if Sam Darnold can be as good as I think that he can be in this system with these weapons, I think this is a team that can be in the mix for a playoff spot. Maybe not necessarily get in, but they'll be in the conversation late in the season.
I think so too, but a lot of it does hinge on what Daniel says here. If Darnold does really bad, I could see top 10. And that is the hard thing here because I wrote a very large article. It kind of got away from me. Usually you try to keep articles to 1,500 words or something. It's a pretty quality read. I think I was like at 4,000. So I kept gathering information, but it's crazy how bad this man's offensive lines were in his past. We focus on the receivers because he's got Jefferson, but the Vikings do have two good tackles. They can block it up better, way better than what Sam Darnold has had before. And that's really been his main issue, is when he gets pressured, if you can lower that pressure percentage even a bit by just having a more competent offensive line, I think you could get a better performance out of him. And that's not even to mention that the career of Justin Jefferson, anytime a quarterback, mostly Kirk Cousins and a little Nick Mullins, but anytime a quarterback hucked a pigskin in the direction of Justin Jefferson, the quarterback rating on throws his way is 112 for his career, which is what Aaron Rodgers' was in 2021 when he won MVP. We cannot understate what that's going to mean. I think that Jefferson has even more potential downfield for deep stuff than he did with Kirk Cousins, because Darnold throws a pretty good deep ball, but also is more willing to take those risks as well. There's no denying it, though. If he stinks, then it's going to go badly. And Cup of Joe Mama, I love the nicknames these people have. If we get a top 6 pick, who would your main priority be? My main priority, Manny, is not talking about the draft as long as I possibly can. But I will still answer this question just because your name is Cupo Joe Mama. It's defensive tackle and corner for me. It's outstandingly those two positions. You agree?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, getting Stephon Gilmore was really good for the secondary that, was really kind of banged up this offseason. And, I think you're just kind of hoping that unit, at least with the corners, can just hold on for most of the season, because I think they're pretty solid everywhere else on defense. And if you can get a young guy in that can be a high impact player, young player next year, then that would be great. And you mentioned defensive tackle. I mean, you and I have been talking about, the interior of the defensive line being able to apply more pressure in the passing game. That's kind of something that this defense has really, even under Brian Flores last year, was kind of missing. We didn't really see a lot of that, and certainly it was missing under Ed Donatel 2 years ago. So that is something I think we'd be looking at. But I'm with you. I don't want to think about the draft yet. I want to see how these 17 games go first, to see, where they'll be picking in the first round next year. And maybe if things go well enough, we could be talking about a team that gets into the playoffs, and that'll be fun. I think playoff football is fun. And with what they did in the offseason, I think that should be the goal, is to try and make the playoffs, even if it's going to be tough sledding along the way. I'm just really excited for what this season is going to look like for this team, for sure. They have way too much talent to think about the draft at this point. And that's why with a football power index, I mean, I respect Seth Walder a lot from ESPN, the analytics person, but all of it, whether it's Vegas, whether it's this, it's all guesses and it's all wrong all the time, which is why we watch. I like to do, and I haven't put it out there yet. I got to put it out there this week. I usually do 50 bold predictions going into the season. And I think I've written like 30, but I haven't filled out the rest of it, but I'll get it out. I promise. And I always go back and look, and some of them are super right. Like, I think I predicted the exact week that Desmond Ridder would be benched or something, like stuff like that. But I remember 2 years ago when I did it, I said the Seattle Seahawks are going to draft number 1. Geno Smith is their quarterback. He's absolutely horrible. I have no idea why they're playing him. And he made the playoffs at 9-8. And then you go back and look and you go, oh, right, because they ran the ball pretty well. Their receivers are excellent and their coaching was good. And I think that the Vikings have a lot of those same signals. And the same thing with Baker Mayfield. You saw the Cleveland Browns, even despite having Joe Flacco, who gave them competent play, make the playoffs. It's not impossible if you have other talent and a head coach who is good. And I think the Vikings have a head coach who reaches a threshold of good. I'm not saying he's great. This is a thing. You missed this during the 6 months we haven't been doing regular shows, Manny, but Brian Flores was adamant that we don't crown players who haven't done anything yet. So I'm not crowning him. I'm not crowning Kevin O'Connell. Okay. He's got to win some playoff games. But I think when you have a baseline for O'Connell and Flores, we know that it's not an Urban Meyer. We know it's not a Matt Patricia. We know that this is somebody who I think moves the needle in a positive direction. And when you have that, it shouldn't be that hard to have a competitive season. Digits says the schedule is beyond nuts this year. I'm sticking with 8 wins. It's
its order is beyond nuts. The beginning, but then the middle is not nuts. And then the end is kind of nuts. How much do you factor a schedule, Manny? Because last year I was thinking about all the times they played like a backup quarterback. Remember when Tyson Bagent played? I mean, the schedule is determined by how healthy the opposing quarterbacks are on your schedule. So right now it looks pretty nasty. By week 2, it might look different.
100%. I mean, they've got, you got the Houston Texans coming to town on week 3. I mean, knock on wood, I wouldn't root for this to happen because I really like him. But if something happens to CJ Stroud between now and then, that completely changes. I mean, you look at that matchup right now, at first thought, you're thinking, yeah, the Texans might be favored in that game, and they probably should be. I mean, they're a team that has one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. They're a playoff team from a year ago. They've got, they've improved. They've upgraded in the receiving core with Stephon Diggs. They got Danielle Hunter now on the defensive side of the ball as well. So on paper, you kind of look at that game and think, yeah, that's going to be a tough game for the Vikings. But if something happens to CJ Stroud between now and then, again, not rooting for that, that changes everything for that game. So I think you just have to kind of let these things play out, and you just kind of see what happens. I mean, week 8 against the Los Angeles Rams, I mean, that's figures to be a tough matchup. Are the Rams going to be healthy by then? Who knows? We'll just kind of see how things sort of play out the rest of the way. But that's why they play these games, because you don't win or lose in a season according to how your schedule is set up before the season starts. You have to play these games to see how things turn out.
And I have the exact same opinion looking at it on paper, though. I mean, it is a bear. But speaking of bears, you don't know what Caleb Williams looks like by middle of the season. You don't know what any of these teams. So I can't quite go on that yet. I think having the hardest 4 teams or 5 game stretch, I guess between the Texans game and the Rams game, is that 5 games there, is really, really hard. And it is in the beginning of the season. You'd rather have it in the later part of the season where maybe a quarterback is injured. Last year, I just had ESPN's Kaylin Kaler on the show the other day, and we were talking about how she had some stat that like 65 quarterbacks played last year, and 4 of them played for the Vikings. If you were doing the opposing schedule last year, you would have said, well, the Vikings and Kirk's playing. And I looked at Mike Sando and his opposing quarterback schedule piece based on the quarterback tiers, and I think the Vikings were 14th as far as opposing quarterback schedule. It was not as high as I expected it to be. So we'll see. I'm not saying that the schedule difficulty is fake news or anything, but it's just hard to figure out in our position right now. Daniel says, my number one thing I'm fascinated by is, do we improve as an offensive line? Kirk was a statue, took pressure badly, more mobile and young quarterback. The ironic part of that is that under pressure, Kirk Cousins statistically way better historically than Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold can run away, and he does have mobility to his game and a playmaking element that has resulted in some of the most insane highlight plays over the last 5 years have come from Sam Darnold running away. Also, some of the most boneheaded plays. So I'm of 2 minds here, Manny. I do think that when Dexter Lawrence inevitably comes at him when the New York Giants play the Minnesota Vikings, Darnold will scramble away and we'll all go, oh yeah, you don't have to check down if you can scoot. But then he'll also fumble and throw interceptions that Kirk would not have thrown. It's the yin and the yang of quarterback play, is figuring out how to deal with that type of pressure. But the interior of the offensive line will be a major determining factor here still, even with a more mobile quarterback.
100%. And you've got guys in there that you just kind of have, you kind of have some question marks about, and you just kind of wonder, like, all right, can they hold up? Can they stay healthy? Can they, grow and improve over the course of the season? And then it's going to come down to Sam Darnold, I think, just being able to make some plays, getting outside of the pocket, extending some plays. He's got a really, really strong arm, so he can really make the throws down the field. It's going to come down to him being able to do that and to just try and limit the boneheaded interceptions. You want more big, good plays than turnovers. And that's why I think it's really going to be fascinating to watch how this plays out with him, because he's never been in a situation like this where he's had these kind of weapons, this kind of a head coach that's really going to lean into his skill set. I mean, it's just Adam Gase and Matt Rule to to Kevin O'Connell, and there's a Kyle Shanahan stop in there as well along the way last year, even though Sam didn't play that much. But I've seen enough from Kevin O'Connell in his first 2 seasons as a head coach to know that he's a better coach than Adam Gase was. Like, I don't think that's that's a pretty low bar.
Manny coming in with flames here.
Yeah, I mean, and Matt Rule too. I mean, it was just I don't think, I mean, it's easy to kind of make fun of Sam Darnold and to say like, yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff there, but you got to also factor in the situations that he was in those first couple of years. And the funny, as soon as Matt Rule was gone out of Carolina, and I think it was Steve Wilkes that took over, Sam Darnold actually started playing a little bit better. He actually started playing well. So I think, I think that year in San Francisco, I think really helped him as well. And now I'm just really excited to see how much that really helped him. And, you couple him with the weapons and the system, I think it has a chance to be really good. But he's got to he does have to limit some of the mistakes that we've seen him make over the years.
I became a little bit of a Darnold truther after gathering as many stats as I could. And I was pulling from NFL Next Gen, all the PFF stuff. And one of the ones that just sort of made my eyes pop out of my head was that Carolina didn't have a ton of other quarterbacks that played during Darnold's 2 years there. It was Baker Mayfield, Cam Newton showed up for a minute, and PJ Walker, and that was really it. And those guys combined, and that's not an impressive group, but it's 3 guys who have played in the league. They went 4-12, and Darnold went 8-9, and their quarterback rating was under 70, and his was closer to 80. That's, again, not saying that he's going to be Joe Montana here, but it does just suggest how bad the situation is, because if you look at San Francisco's quarterbacks, even Nick Mullins had big numbers in San Francisco. Jimmy Garoppolo was a star quarterback in San Francisco. And then someone who I think is very good, Brock Purdy, becomes MVP level. We know that the circumstances push the needle with quarterbacks. The real question for me isn't whether that's going to happen here. It's just how much it's going to happen. And just to tie that back in, if the offensive line is good, it's going to happen more. The more clean pockets you could give Sam Darnold, his arm talent is outrageous. If he can throw the ball from clean pockets, he's going to be good. But I think that they have to play a little bit differently than they've played before, and they have to be more malleable than they were when Josh Dobbs was in. That's not a good sample to pull from because he showed up in the middle of the season. And this is the true challenge for O'Connell, is that he has now an entire spring and summer to design this offense and curate it for this man's skills. So can you identify this man's skills, what you have on the team, Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler, that's a much better backfield, and work to your strengths there rather than just plug and play into your offense and do it your way? We're going to see how that plays out, because this is the first real look we're going to get at that. Janet says, most excited to see how good the pass rush is with Grenard, Van Ginkel, Turner, and some more experienced cornerbacks. It is the sad state of last year's corners, Manny, that they are significantly upgraded with Shaq Griffin, who has bounced around, and Stephon Gilmore, who is our age. Actually, he's in our age bracket. Somebody, a friend of mine who is in his early 20s, mentioned not knowing what the Matrix was or not having seen it or something. And I was like, oh, but Stephon Gilmore's still around. He knows what the Matrix is because he was watching it in high school like we were. Anyway, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Turner versus Hunter Wanham, I think, is also an upgrade, just like Gilmore, Griffin, and Byron Murphy is an upgrade over Murphy and Evans, and Metellus always playing the slot, right? I think that the personnel on defense is being overlooked for how much better it is now.
Yeah, going with the corners first, I think Byron Murphy Jr. moving inside into the slot is a spot like that. Like I think that's a better spot for him versus having to be on the outside. And I think we'll get, I think we'll start seeing more out of him. I think we'll start seeing him play better. I mean, he wasn't terrible last year, but he was just kind of meh last year, it seemed like. But I think he was in a position where he was being asked to do something that might not be best suited for him. In that particular situation, it had to be that way because they didn't really have a lot of better options, Brian Flores last year. But I think now you kind of you put Griffin in there and you put Gilmore in there, and now it allows everybody to kind of fit into the spot where they're probably going to be at their best. And Gilmore's 34 years old, but I think there's enough tread left on those tires to where he still has this. He still has the smarts and the veteran savvy that has made him a great player over the years. So I think that's really going to help a lot. I'm with you on the edge rushers. The thing I love about this particular situation is they're not going to have to rely on one guy to do all of the beastly pass rushing work. It felt like, DJ Wanham was okay at times last year, but it was like Danielle Hunter or bust. Like if Danielle Hunter isn't getting any pressure off the edge, then the defense they were going to get gashed a lot. And I think when you throw in this three-headed monster, Van Ginkel, Grenard, and then especially for Dallas Turner, because now there's no pressure on him to step in as a rookie and, okay, Dallas, your first round pick, we traded up to get you. Now, as a rookie, step in there and give us 14 and a half sacks. Like that, they don't need that from him because Van Ginkel is going to have a role. Grenard's going to have a role. These are guys that have been in the league for a few years now and have been productive. And now it's kind of like, I think whatever they get out of Dallas Turner is going to be a bonus. It's going to be a plus. And I think that's really good for him coming out of the gate because there's not going to be a lot of pressure on him. So it's going to be fun. I'm with the commenter. I think this defense is going to be really, really fun to watch because I think it's starting to really kind of shape into Brian Flores' vision as well. And I think that's going to be really important.
And with Van Ginkel, he has been a little banged up in his career. So a lot of the players, like even Grenard as well, they come along with a bit of that asterisk of they have to play and they have to be healthy. I don't think people know how good Andrew Van Ginkel is because he has not been a double-digit sack guy, and he's played for the Miami Dolphins. So I don't know how many Miami Dolphins games you were looking at one of their outside linebackers for, but this is a guy who's been way up there by PFF. And when I went back and looked at him after they signed him, like, whoa, this dude is all over the field. They line him up in different spots, but he makes plays. Even in training camp, he was getting sacks and interceptions. He is an all-around type of player. That's one of the reasons you believe in Brian Flores is he identified this guy as a 5th-round draft pick out of Wisconsin, and he just starts making plays. That's who they brought in here, is someone who can do multiple things, can get after the passer. He's quick. He could bend around the edge. He's a smart player. That's something that they just didn't really have up there last year. It's DJ Wanham was the extreme poor man's version of that, who could sack Justin Fields if he was hanging around the pocket for 4 seconds. But Van Ginkel makes plays. And I'm excited to see just where he lines up and how they work this combination. I think that's what Janet was talking about too, is how they work that combination of those 3 guys. It is more versatile than Danielle Hunter, who's really just a lineup on the left defensive end, and that's it. Zoomer Kev, league most interested. I tossed it out there for folks for most interested stuff because we've got our lists. Lack of teams with answers at quarterback and limited quarterback options in the draft and free agency. Are this many teams going to be content to be the 2021 Vikings? So who are we talking about? Who doesn't have answers at quarterback right now? Because I always think, Manny, that it feels like at the beginning of a season, everybody's got it figured out. And then 4 weeks into the year, we go, uh-oh, there's a bunch of teams that don't. Cleveland, I just pulling up my list of NFL teams. Cleveland is definitely stuck. From what I saw from Deshaun Watson, I don't think that that's going to change from what it's been over the last few years. Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, can you imagine? They're talking themselves into in Pittsburgh because they always do, and their fan base is insane. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, but it's not a good scene. We'll see about Tennessee. I'm curious about Will Levis since the Vikings passed on him, and he showed some flashes last year, showed some flashes of bad last year. There's a couple. The Giants are another team that doesn't have a future quarterback. I don't think it's Daniel Jones. They're trying to grind out a playoff appearance so they can keep their jobs with Daniel Jones. You talk about, this is why it was so important that they drafted McCarthy, Manny, because we just, Zoomer Kev's point about the 2021 Vikings, we felt hopeless. It was just you're not winning the Super Bowl with that team. And the future, you're not drafting a quarterback because you weren't bad enough. And what is this? And I think that if you're a team like the Giants, you have to be saying, what is this? They don't have a great team around their quarterback, but if they were to get a good quarterback with Malik Neighbors and their defense, they could start. They have a good left tackle. They could start building. But with Daniel Jones in that contract, they can't even do that. I think a team that, and maybe I'll be proven wrong about this, that doesn't have an answer at quarterback is Seattle with Geno Smith. Imagine if the Vikings didn't have McCarthy and it was just Darnold. That's where Seattle kind of is. He's good, but he's not good enough. He's supposed to be a filler while they could get someone else, but he played too good in 1 year to be that. And they don't really have an answer going into the future either. Carolina, I'm super interested in Bryce Young. I'm jumping the gun a little there for our lists, but I am super interested in that. How about New Orleans? Tampa Bay with Baker, are they actually winning anything there? This is a good point. It's a reminder that this spot right here the Vikings are in is one of the better positions to be in for the future with the young quarterback that they were able to draft.
I'll throw Las Vegas in there as well.
Oh, yeah.
With Gardner Minshew. I mean, he's not a long-term answer. He's another guy that's just kind of a stopgap guy. And I don't think Aiden O'Connell is the future there either. I mean, he couldn't even win the job out of camp this year. So, I mean, the Vikings are in a good spot, like you said. I mean, that's why when you get into a draft class like the 2024 draft class of quarterbacks, if you're in need of one, you got to take one. You just have to and try and build around that guy, because otherwise you end up like the New York Giants. I mean, the Giants, in a lot of ways, the Vikings are kind of responsible for the Giants being where they're at right now, because Daniel Jones bleeped around and won a playoff game at US Bank Stadium and got himself paid. And the Giants stupidly gave him that contract, and now they're kind of in no man's land with him because, you don't really think that he's good, and, he's getting paid a lot of money. So, like, do you want to continue to invest in him? I don't know what the situation is as far as, like, can they get out of that contract or what, or how soon they can get out of that contract. But again, like next year too, it's like, all right, well, what does this quarterback class look like next year? I mean, we know Shedeur Sanders is probably going to get taken pretty high. Outside of him, I mean, we're going to have to, we're going to,
if he survives with that offensive line.
Yeah. By the way, side note too, and I love me some Coach Prime, but him saying that his offensive line did a great job protecting Shedeur against North Dakota State, I kind of wonder if we were watching the same game that Coach Prime was watching.
Smashed. Yeah. Stephon Gilmore is old enough to remember when Deion Sanders was the coolest person on the planet. That's the thing. I always say this about him. Like, I don't think he's doing a good job, I think the press conferences are a clown show, but it's Deion, man. It's Deion. Yeah. He was the coolest person. Let me just stop real quick before we move on. And I love what we're doing here, answering the questions. When we started doing this last year as a live show, Manny, we probably had a dozen people, and some of them were my parents watching. And now we have a big audience watching us. So welcome, everybody. If you don't know Manny Hill, we worked together 1500 ESPN for a long time. He produced for Patrick Royce, one of my best friends, huge W guy as well. And we're going to be doing the show together Monday and Thursday nights. And I wasn't sure about whether we'd be doing the answering questions and stuff, but you guys are so good at this. I love this. I love this format of doing it. So keep throwing your questions in the comment section. do have a couple of ad reads for us, Manny, as always. And so far, your internet's doing a great job. So shout out to your internet. That was a joke from last year for those of you just joining, that Manny would freeze once per show. But I have to remind everyone, and there is an interactive element, by the way, to the ad read. So don't zone out on me, Manny. But I have to remind everyone that US Cellular, notice the way that we use our phones has gotten ironic. We try to put our phones down for dinner, but the menu is on a QR code. That is ironic. We hit like on social media posts we don't like. Ironic, which is why US Cellular created Us Mode to help us reconnect with each other and use our phones less ironically. A phone company wanting people to use their phones less, that's ironic. So let's find us again with Us Mode from US Cellular. Visit uscellular.com/built-for-us to get started. Also, Manny, Underdog Fantasy is now a sponsor of this show, which is fantastic. They are the easiest place to play fantasy sports, also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. You got to check out the Pick'em. It's easy to play. You pick between 2 and 8 stats for your favorite players. Choose whether they'll go higher or lower, and you can win up to 20 times your money going 5 for 5. Use the promo code PURPLE. I'll tell you guys a secret. If we get to 500 people that use the promo code PURPLE, I get a little bonus. So if you could, that would be awesome over at Underdog Fantasy. Promo code PURPLE, claim your special pick. First time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So Manny, a couple of pick'ems for Sunday. Let me we'll do some more on Thursday night because there's a bunch of them for this game. Let me just throw one at you right now since we're talking about Underdog Fantasy. Attempts and completions and yards for Mr. Sam Darnold. The higher or lower numbers are 20.5 for completions, 33.5 for attempts, and 244.5 for yards. Would you go higher or lower than 20 for 33 with 244 for Sam Darnold against the Giants?
I'll go lower on completions. I'll go higher on attempts because KOC loves to, as you say, push the pass button a lot. And I'll go higher in yards as well. I think he's going to hit a lot of, I don't think he's going to complete a ton of passes, but I think there's going to be a lot of deep passes to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison to make some big plays.
So you're thinking a little bit of a lower completion percentage there. I'm going to go lower on everything. I think that Darnold's going to end up with something like 215 yards on 16 for 28 passing. And if that's the case, if they don't need to throw 33 times, they're going to win. Another stat from doing way too much Sam Darnold research: when Sam Darnold threw 35 passes or more in his career, he was 2-14. And crazy thing is, Kirk Cousins was, I think, 10-6 or something when he did it under KOC because he threw so much with Kirk Cousins all the time. And I mean, that's because he's playing from behind. It's not where you want to be with Darnold. You don't want to be making him throw 35 passes.
He was the Rich Kotite Jets when he threw that many passes. My goodness.
Yes, exactly. Mike says it's so hard to know what this team will look like. Feels like an all new defense. New quarterback brings a question about the offense. What if we are actually good? What if they're actually good, Manny?
Then great.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Great.
But, put it this way, because there's limitations to how much you can write in the comment box. What are the chances they're actually good?
I think there's a decent chance. I honestly think there's a decent chance. I mean, I think the weapons, Sam Darnold has talent. I think this defense has talent. I think there's a chance that this team can really compete and be really good. I'm not putting them in the NFC Championship game by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly not doing that. But I think there is a chance that they can compete well enough, win enough games, and get into the playoffs. What they do after that, I don't think we'll see much outside of that. But I think that there's enough here to make you think. I mean, they lost Kirk Cousins, I guess 40% of the way into the season last year, the Packers game when Kirk got hurt. What was that? Was that like week 8?
Week 8, yeah.
Week 8. So about
Whatever
halfway through the season.
That is.
Yeah. So about halfway through the year, they lost Kirk. And they were in the conversation with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins playing quarterback for them. I mean, things kind of fell apart at the end, but those first couple of games, they kept themselves in the conversation. And so I think with, you factor in Sam Darnold being here now, going through an entire offseason, going through an entire training camp, I think Sam can have an opportunity to play kind of free because he doesn't have JJ McCarthy looking over his shoulder, and there's not a lot of pressure on him. I mean, it is kind of like, all right, Sam, here you go, 17 games you're going to play, and as long as you're healthy. I mean, don't throw 30 interceptions like Jameis Winston, but if you play at least competently, you're going to play this entire season. And I think that's going to help with Sam as well. And I think if they can kind of weather this storm of these early tough games, get off to a good start against a bad team in the Giants, at least in theory, a bad team in the Giants this coming Sunday, and then hang in there for these first 5-6 games. If you're around 500, then I think you've got a shot to really contend and get yourself in the playoff conversation.
Well, Sean says, are you surprised that the Vikings are so undervalued in the rankings? No, I'm not surprised because everything with Vegas over-unders, everything with predictions is always going to come back to number 14. And anybody who is trying to talk themselves into Darnold, and I've got all the stats and somebody else, Sean tweeted that the Jets line rankings from PFF were 28th, 30th. There was one year Carolina was 31st, and the Vikings preseason offensive line ranking for PFF was 11th. I mean, even just having good tackles is something he's never had before, and you can get talked into that. But at the end of the day, if you're the predictor, you're the power ranker, you're Vegas, whatever, you're going to look at the stats that he's put up in his career and say, I just don't see how this team is supposed to be good. And it's hard to get over that even with everything else that we have been talking about for this entire show, where I think that they're going to be better than that. You think they're going to be better than that. It would surprise me if Darnold didn't have his moments throughout this year and didn't win games. You talk about the end of last year. They are winning in Denver and Madison fumbles. They are winning in Denver and Cortland Sutton catches a punt off the arm of Russell Wilson in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. Cincinnati, T. Higgins makes the most absurd catch and scores touchdown in Randy Moss fashion, in part because Mekhi Blackman started celebrating thinking his teammate had caught it. And they blow a tush push twice because I guess they thought Brandon Powell was the right guy to push the tush, but I don't understand any of that. But they should have won that game. And then even Detroit, Justin Jefferson is running wide open, and all Nick Mullins has to do is just loft it out in front of him, and they score a touchdown. They win that game. These are games with quarterbacks that are worse than Sam Darnold, and they were able to win in Atlanta. They're able to win big against New Orleans. That's pretty convincing to me that you can play with other teams in the playoff race. It doesn't mean, like you said, they're going to the NFC Championship, but I think you can be in the conversation a lot more than what some people are predicting. Where is my article? I'm sorry. I'll just plug the newsletter. Thank you, Digits. If you go over to purpleinsider.com, or actually even if you type in purpleinsider.football, I bought that. You could go over there, and that's where you can sign up for the newsletter and you can see my articles. But I left the Sam Darnold one completely free, so you don't have to sign up or pay for it. You can just go and check it out, purpleinsider.com, and give that a read. But I dug into everything I could possibly find, looked back at every quote from Jefferson, from O'Connell, from Darnold, and talked to 3 different analysts about it. So did my deep research on that. Wade says if Darnold plays 17 games, over under for him, 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, 20 interceptions, 62% completion percentage. What does Manny think? Manny's been here for one show, and Wade is done with me asking these questions. He only wants this from you, Manny. So what do you think for each one of those numbers?
Okay, yards, 4,000 yards. I'll say over because I don't think it's not as hard to throw for 4,000 yards in the NFL anymore as it used to be. If this was 1995, I would probably say under. You just didn't see it that much. 30 touchdowns, I think, is a little bit aggressive. I'll say less there. And I think he'll throw less than 20 interceptions. 20 interceptions in 2024 in the NFL is a lot. I mean, if you're throwing 20 picks, I mean, now we did see Jameis Winston throw 30 just a handful of years ago. But I think if you're throwing 20 or more interceptions in today's NFL, you're just flat out bad. And I don't think Sam Darnold, with these weapons, with this team and this system, is going to be that bad. So I would say, 4,200 yards, 25 touchdowns, and maybe like 13 interceptions.
I think that's good. There were only, I think, 4 guys who threw 30 plus touchdowns last year. So I don't think that's going to happen. Right. 20 interceptions also, as you said, that takes a rare bad season. This is not 1996. Stephon Gilmore is old enough to remember when quarterbacks threw 20 interceptions sometimes, but most younger people are not, because it doesn't happen much anymore. 62 is a great number for his completion percentage. That's very close. The other ones are easier if he stays healthy, should go over 4,000 yards. But even if it was 3,800, 3,600, and it was a much more 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, they run the ball more, hit on a few deep shots, you could still be in the conversation, I think. Manny, we still have a lot of questions from people, but I want to get to our list. I don't want to let that get away from us. You're here until 8:30. I go marathon style, so I'll probably stay even after you go. You have another job. I don't. I just sit here and answer football questions. So let's talk about your list, and we could go back and forth on this. Things that we are most excited for the Vikings 2024 season and the overall NFL 2024 season. And I did figure out how to play some music underneath this, so I could also try to do that if I can get Okay, let me turn it down a little. How's that? You want this for a ranking bit here?
Let's do it. I love it.
Okay. All right. Let's go.
All right.
You go first.
Okay. Well, we kind of hinted at this earlier. We mentioned this earlier. I'm really excited about the Vikings defense and what it's going to look like. They spent a lot of money in the offseason getting Grenard and bringing in Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman as well, former Gopher for a lot of the local folks who have followed Gopher football like myself. I think this defense is going to be pretty good. I think they've got a pretty good chance of being top 10 if they can stay healthy and and play to their full ability. And like I mentioned before, there's not a lot of pressure on Dallas Turner to be just like a beast out of the gate. Now, if he is, and we saw some signs of it in the preseason, then great. That's awesome. Then maybe this defense can be top 5. But I think this is a unit that I think if everybody stays healthy, they can avoid the catastrophic injuries. This is a unit I think that can be pretty good. And depending on how Sam Darnold plays, it might be a unit that has to kind of carry this team along this season to kind of remain relevant in the playoff hunt.
I am going to go other side of the ball coaching, which would be Kevin O'Connell and how he adjusts and adapts the offense. We've been talking about it quite a bit here on the show, and I just really want to see how it's different. Is it going to be a little bit more like what Gary Kubiak would do with this team, or is he just going to have no risk it, no biscuit, Bruce Arians style, whatever, Sam Darnold, huck it down the field. Let's find out what you could do with that arm. I mean, you could talk about it all you want. You could see it in training camp and how it's playing out, but will it actually be something different than it's been before? Or will we end up with a little bit of square peg round hole like we did last year with Josh Dobbs, that it just didn't seem like there was an adjustment that they could really make? And I'm going to pair that with just Sam Darnold's arm. Even if it goes bad, you're going to see things from his arm that you haven't seen in quite some time, because Case Keenum's arm, pretty meh. Teddy Bridgewater's arm, pretty meh. Sam Bradford's arm, a lot more like this. But this is even crazier because Sam Bradford would throw from the pocket. He could roll out a little bit. But with Sam Darnold, he can be running that way and just flip it, turn the other way and throw it. Kind of what people have been talking about with, Caleb Williams and Patrick Mahomes. He can do those things with his arm, and it's pretty fun to watch. So I'm gonna connect those two, just the offensive scheme and how it's adjusted to Darnold and Darnold's freakish arm. What's next on your list?
Next on my list, Vikings related as well. Will Reichard, man. Let's see this. Let's see this kicking game, man. I mean, the kicking game for the Vikings has historically really going all the way back to Gary Anderson in 1998 when he was perfect during the regular season. It kind of feels like ever since he missed a very infamous kick in a certain game against a certain team at the Metrodome, it's just been a kind of a roller coaster of a ride with Vikings kickers really ever since then. And Will Reichard was great in the preseason, and he was really good at Alabama. Now let's see if it just carries on, and if the Vikings have finally found their Justin Tucker, their guy that's just going to be their kicker for the next decade because he's really good and he makes as many kicks as possible. I want to see it. They may have had that with Daniel Carlson 7 or 6 years ago, whenever it was, and then Mike Zimmer just decided no, he's got to go because he missed a couple of kicks early in the season. So I'm excited to see how real Will Reichard does. And, if he misses a couple of kicks this year, let's just ride this out with him. Let's just see how it goes. Let's not panic. Be patient. He's young. Let's just see how it plays out. But I'm excited to see how the kicking game goes this year.
Shows how dyed in the wool you really are, Manny. You go right to the kicker. I'm going to toss this out there. We've been talking about the schedule, but this is crazy. You'll never believe it. I like good football players, and I like good football. I get to see CJ Stroud. I get to see what Jordan Love's going to be. The San Francisco offense. The Lions are really good. This schedule has a lot of fun on it. Matthew Stafford in person is really something because you talk about arm talent. It's ridiculous. I'm looking forward to the players that they're going to play. The star talent that the Vikings are going to go up against this year is phenomenal. Caleb Williams. I can't wait to see what Caleb Williams looks like. I show up at the stadium on Sundays often thinking about, I'm really interested. Like last year against Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes in person. I hadn't seen him before in person because it was, who was it that started? It wasn't Chad Henne. Matt Moore. Yeah, Matt Moore started in 2019. Yep, the botched punt, Tyreek Hill thing, and the game-winning field goal, all that in 2019. So I hadn't seen Mahomes before. And I'm like, this is awesome. Let's see what Mahomes looks like. I've got that feeling big time for week 2 and CJ Stroud, or week 3 and CJ Stroud. Haven't seen him in person. Let's go. I very, very much excited to see Flores' defense versus some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Did you have more for Vikings, or what do you got for around the league?
Well, just to piggyback off of your schedule thing, also one game you didn't mention, December 8th, the Atlanta Falcons come to town.
Oh, yes. Yes. I hadn't thought too much about that yet, but no, I am much more interested in Dallas and Atlanta. That's who I'm interested in. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm excited to see Michael Penix play and come to US Bank Stadium. Yeah, right. So, yeah, we'll see.
Did I say that out loud?
We'll see. That is on my list. I'll spoil that. Rookie quarterbacks in general is on my list. So what do you got for around the league?
Yeah, around the league. Yeah, I had that as well. Some of the young quarterbacks that are going to get a chance to play, the rookies. I mean, Caleb Williams is going to play. Bo Nix won his starting job in Denver. So those young guys getting a chance to play, and the year 2 guys you mentioned, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson coming back now for the Colts. How healthy is he going to be? Is there going to be some growth and development with him? All the things that we're hearing with Anthony Richardson is we know the physical tools are there. It's just, his mind is there. He's got a really sharp mind in terms of decision making and everything. There's just some questions about, accuracy and ball placement and stuff like that. Curious to see how that kind of progresses now as he comes into his sophomore year coming off of that injury. And I think Shane Steichen he's a hell of a head coach. Having the Colts in the mix like that with Gardner Minshew last year was pretty impressive. So Anthony Richardson coming back for year 2 is going to be really exciting. So all the young quarterbacks that are getting opportunities to play, unfortunately, we're not going to see JJ McCarthy here locally, but I think all of the young guys getting a chance to play is going to be really interesting. I know he's not starting week 1, but I do think we're going to see Drake May at some point this season. It might be late in the year. But the young guys, I think we're going to see quite a few young quarterbacks playing this year.
It may be sacrilegious, Manny, but I'm excited about the Dallas Cowboys. I want to see what it looks like. Zimmer, that defense, Micah Parsons, the drama. It's either going to be that they are great, and I picked them to go to the Super Bowl, by the way. I'm riding that all the way to hell. I don't care. I have Texans and Cowboys for the Super Bowl, and I'm curious about what you have as your prediction as well. But I want to see if they can overcome all this drama, what Mike's defense looks like there, if this is finally the year. They've been so good in the regular season, and that it just hasn't happened in the postseason. Does it turn into a drama fest and McCarthy is fired, or do they blow right past it and they're one of the best teams in the league because that's reflective of their talent? And just in general, what team that we think is going to be good goes down? Because Dallas also falls into this category as well. People are going to laugh at me if they go 3-6 and fire their coach. They're gonna be like, didn't you pick them for the Super Bowl? Well, that happened to me last year with the Bengals. Burrow got hurt and I'm like, well, and there goes my Super Bowl prediction right away. But I've never got one right ever in my entire life. And that's why they play the games, Manny. But what team do you think that everyone thinks is going to be great and just totally bombs? Because I was thinking about San Francisco for this if Brock Purdy regresses big time. Philadelphia if it implodes with their coach, which it kind of seems like it might with Nick Sirianni. And the other one might be Buffalo. No Stephon Diggs. Their coach is a little on edge, maybe, after playoff failures. And they've had to rebuild and retool a lot of things there. They're kind of in transition. Is there one that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, Philadelphia comes to mind for sure. I just, with all the drama we heard about with Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, that relationship being awkward, fractured, whatever you want to call it, it does raise some question marks. Some veteran leaders that have been kind of staples with that team over the years are not there. They retired. Fletcher Cox isn't there anymore. Jason Kelsey retired as well. Those are guys that were like glue guys, leaders in the locker room, terrific players on the field, obviously, but guys behind the scenes that really kind of held teams together. And those guys aren't there anymore. So now it really does kind of fall all on Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni to kind of keep that thing going and bounce back from their meltdown last year. Another team that I'm thinking about, just because I think we're kind of assuming he's going to be the Aaron Rodgers of old, but I'm curious about the New York Jets. Aaron's coming off of a, pretty significant injury, an injury that we saw that we're going to see Kirk Cousins come back from as well. I think, we're kind of assuming that Aaron Rodgers is just going to come back and be Aaron Rodgers because he, I don't know, got high on some ayahuasca or something in the offseason, or I don't know, was on some island, whoever knows whatever the hell he was doing. But Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. And he's coming off of a significant injury. The offseason was kind of weird because he was like not showing up, and there was this talk about like, well, they're unexcused absences, and the communication between him and Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh is a guy that I really like. I think he's a good coach, but if his quarterback is just kind of marching to the beat of his own drum like he has forever, I kind of wonder if that's going to come to a head. And if that team that has a lot of pressure on it, if they're going to be able to maintain that and really compete. On paper, they should be terrific. They should be winning that division, between them and Miami, I think. But I think we got to see it play out first.
Probably the widest variance of any team in the league. Could win 4 games and have it completely fall apart and Saleh loses the team and everything else, or they could end up being in the AFC Championship game because Aaron Rodgers shocks us all and wins another MVP at 40. Imagine being 40 also. Gosh, someone would have to be ancient to be in that range of age. I would never. I'll throw one last one for me, and then I just want your Super Bowl prediction. Since I've put the worst one out there as mine, you have to do better. Harbaugh. Does Connor Stallions show up at the sideline somewhere? Is he like wearing the sunglasses? Is Connor Stallions like this on the sideline somewhere? Just trying to steal signs or whatever, steal whatever he could steal, I guess. What ridiculousness shall follow Jim Harbaugh is what I want to know. And the other thing is too, if they win and they make the playoffs and the Vikings don't, watch out for the Harbaugh people. They were very serious during the hiring process about Jim Harbaugh. And even when he got hired back to the Chargers, I did a show and 60% of the audience was yelling that they should have hired Harbaugh. So that's one I'm going to be watching very closely. That's one of the more, we talk about wide variance. I don't think that roster's got a lot of wide variance, but knowing Jim Harbaugh, he could just get them to the playoffs or it could be a complete disaster. So who's your Super Bowl pick before you go, Manny?
I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson and company, I think they get over the hump. I don't think Lamar is going to win the MVP again this year, but I think that team is going to finally get over the hump and get to the Super Bowl. You know what, Matthew? I think the Detroit Lions are going to go to the Super Bowl. It is.
You're the second guest of the day who's picked the Lions. You won't be surprised that our friend Brian Murphy
of course,
Lions as well. He had to. So Lions in the Super Bowl would really be something.
Lions, Ravens. And I'll pick the Ravens to win it.
Okay. So. I like that. I'll pick the Texans to beat the Cowboys in the Super Bowl because you just never look. The Chiefs will probably make it. And one of us should just pick the Chiefs. But how can you pick the Chiefs? The other team, Murph picked Cincinnati, which I think is a really good team that last year had the group to do it, and then Burrow got hurt, and they still won a lot of games with Jake Browning. It also could be someone like LA, like not the Chargers, but the Rams. They got there before. They've rebuilt that team. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp have not really been healthy at the same time. If they can get to that point, they've got a running game now. The NFC is wide open. There's nobody. I think that there will be some regression with San Francisco, and there's nobody that is just the clear-cut NFC. You are the team that is going to be the big-time favorite like there is in the AFC with Kansas City, Cincinnati. Buffalo still gets that treatment in Vegas, so we have to mention them as well. And then Houston, that's kind of the big group along with Baltimore there. It could be any one of those teams, though, going to the Super Bowl. So, Manny, this is good, man. This is good to be back with the hot routes. Every Monday and Thursday, Manny Hill is going to join me. It'll be the same format as it was tonight. I will start out the show a little bit earlier, go through some of the notes from TCO Performance Center. Then Manny will come on. We'll have our topics. We'll answer your questions. Did you enjoy answering questions, Manny? I love this format of people jumping in and talking with us, making it a whole kind of group effort here.
I love it. I love to hear from the listeners and the viewers and to get their perspective and just talking football. I mean, it's this is fun, man. I can't wait. Looking forward to Thursday and looking forward to every Monday as well. And thank you very much for that comment. I appreciate that.
People are loving it. People are loving it. Some people wanted to know where you were. I was like, what am I? I'm not going to make you come back in June. And when you have a life, but during football season, you have no life other than football. I know that. So I will see you on Thursday night. I'm going to keep answering some questions here for probably another half an hour or so. And we'll carry on, but hot routes with Manny Hill Monday, Thursday night, and
baby.
We'll be doing it. We'll be starting around. Well, I think I'm going to start around 7, and then you're going to pop in 7:30. So what people started doing last year, once we got rolling with the show, was turn on the TV for the Monday and Thursday games, watching the TV, listening to us. It's a great plan for you. So thanks again, Manny. You and I will talk on Thursday night. Appreciate it, man.
All right, see you guys.
Manny Hill, everybody. That is a man who loves his football. Monday and Thursday night. I am so happy to be back with Manny Hill. All right, let's get back to your questions. You've left a lot of comments, so I'm sorry if I have scrolled by them and missed them. I'm going to do the best I can to catch up, talk for a few more minutes. Then I got an article to write about Aaron Jones. Got to go work on that as well. Mike says, if you predict 9-8 for the Vikings, what is the division record? I think it would be huge if we went 3-3. Yeah, that is kind of what they have to have. It's hard to find 9-8 without giving them 3-3. And about the division, those are the games that, think about all the years where the Vikings were a much better team than Chicago. But the familiarity at this point in the division, these coaches have been here over multiple seasons. So the Vikings coaching staff knows the Lions coaching staff, knows the Packers coaching staff, knows Chicago, and that brings those games closer together to the point where when you're starting Nick Mullins, you still have a shot to beat Detroit twice last year. I think it's just because the teams know what each other does really well and what each other's weaknesses are, and they become very exciting games when that happens. 3-3 is still hard, though, when you have the way that the Packers played on offense, the number of receivers they have, when the Lions are as stacked as they are. But can you get even 2 against Caleb Williams, a rookie quarterback, against Brian Flores' defense is an edge to Brian Flores' defense. And we saw last year when guys were inexperienced, quarterbacks were inexperienced going up against Brian Flores, they had a lot of problems. Sean says, keep in mind is when teams are running their own schedule gauntlet before playing us, especially running the NFC North gauntlet. Yeah, and when we try to factor in the schedule, if you were even doing a simulation trying to figure out who has the harder schedule, a lot of times what we do is just plug in Vegas expectations and then say, all right, well, the schedule is based on preseason expectations, but then Vegas is half wrong with all of their expectations anyway. And what you're talking about is the other teams have to go through tough games as well. And you never know how somebody's going to come in here. And it was brought up at some point in the comments about last year with San Francisco, Deebo Samuel, I think it was him, right? Was not playing. He was out and McCaffrey was banged up. You just don't know what a team is going to look like when you actually face them. So right now it looks tough. That might change. It might still, or it might look different. We just don't know yet. And that could be a factor in terms of how their season goes. And a lot of the, whether it's 9-8 or whether it's 6-11 or whether they shock us and win 12 or something, a lot of it has to do with that stuff. How the other team's schedules play out. In 2017, we tend to forget that Anthony Barr hurt Aaron Rodgers and they won 2 games against the Packers for free because they didn't have Aaron Rodgers, and they likely would have lost those games had they had him. And they faced some other quarterbacks that weren't too good, and it helped them get to the number 1 defense. You don't have to apologize for it if that's how you get there, but you need things to go your way in order to get to this 9-8 record that we're talking about. Vikings fan says, if the Vikings go to the postseason with Sam Darnold and he looks good, do we do an extension with Darnold or McCarthy for 2025? It would still be McCarthy. You make the playoffs at 9-8. Darnold throws 21 touchdowns, 12 picks, 3,800 yards. You're still going to McCarthy after that, but you would be very happy with Darnold. If they make the playoffs, it's more of a belief in what they're going to be with McCarthy than it is the conversation about keeping Sam Darnold. It's, if you could take this guy and make him into a playoff quarterback when his previous quarterback rating for his career was 78, you have a lot of belief in what you're going to do with the franchise quarterback, JJ McCarthy. And I think that it was trending toward, in training camp, had McCarthy gone to Cleveland and taken first team reps, I don't think it was going to be week 1 for McCarthy, but it was trending toward McCarthy's going to be ready to go faster than people thought he was going to be. That's how pleased they were with what JJ McCarthy was doing. And you can already see some elements of JJ McCarthy's game that are better than Sam Darnold. I think he sees the field better than Sam Darnold does. He could be a better decision maker, which was one of the things that everyone liked about him coming out, than Sam Darnold. There is a little more leadership type moxie with McCarthy as well. And definitely playmaking. getting outside and making plays. Darnold has the wow ones, but McCarthy, I think, can do it a little more consistently. So if you could take Darnold to the playoffs, you could do even better in the future with McCarthy. I think that's reasonable to think. So that would be the biggest takeaway from that. Not, hey, let's keep Darnold around. If Darnold goes 35 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, is in the running for MVP, and they have reached the NFC Championship game, then things will get more tricky. I don't know that that's going to happen, but Vikings history is weird, man. So you never know. Test Account says, what are your thoughts on the cornerback room? How huge of a signing is Gilmore? What about the run defense? I remember how the Eagles ran down their throats last year. Yeah, all good questions. The cornerback room is, I don't think it's that volatile, actually, because we have huge sample sizes on these corners that are going to play the most. It was volatile if they were going to run out Andrew Booth Jr. and a Caleb Evans. Instead, when you have Gilmore, Griffin, and Murphy, we understand, based on what they've been recently, what they should be if they remain healthy. Gilmore still has it. He was in the top 10 PFF grade last year in man coverage. He is a really elite athlete when he came out in the NFL. It's a lot like Patrick Peterson. When he came out in the draft, he was a top pick, partly because he was an unreal athlete, which there's still some of that there. And then you add the experience that he has, and he can make plays on the football. He gets interceptions. He gets PBUs. He's going to be better than a Caleb Evans was going to be. I don't even think it should be close. And what I found very interesting historically was that if corners got to this age, they usually perform pretty well, because if you were 33 and you weren't playing well, teams moved on. So the fact that teams are still bringing in Stephon Gilmore speaks to his chances of being good. Shaq Griffin has had a lot of ups and downs after getting off to a good start to his career, but he is a decent man corner. Maybe they could do that a little more. And Murphy's the same sort of deal where there's ups and downs. These aren't elite corners. There is a ceiling on the cornerback group. It's not going to dominate, but competent based on they're not going to make mental errors constantly. I mean, at least we know that they're going to be in the right places. And I think all three of them can make plays on the football, but especially Gilmore should be better. Run defense. Yeah, they got run over in that game, but then it didn't really happen on a weekly basis. I think their run defense was fine last year overall. Harrison Phillips got worn down. Jonathan Buller got worn down. And the one thing about that is that it's deeper now with this group of defensive tackles / 3-4 DNs. It is deeper, but also you don't have Danielle Hunter and you don't have Jordan Hicks, who is a really good run defending linebacker. It could be a little weaker this year. That Eagles game was crazy, but overall, I think I don't have it in front of me. Statistically, I think that they were a pretty good run defense, and I would expect that again, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of a drop off if you're playing. Van Ginkel has been good at it, but not Grenard. I don't expect Turner to be that great at it. Cashman is not on the same level as Jordan Hicks was. So there will be some give and take to this. All right, let me scroll. Rich says, give us your hot take on McCarthy when he comes back. Do you mean like when he comes back as in when he will return, or like what he's going to look like? Because when he's going to return is easy. He's not coming back this year. He's done for the season. He's on IR. They didn't put him with a designation to return. They may have been able to do that if they wanted to, but you think about, would it have been a good idea to have him rehab the whole season and then start week 18 or something? What does that make sense? Or just have him focus on doing what he needs to do to understand offense, understand what it's going to be like on a weekly basis, study Sam Darnold, study defenses, all those things. And then when he comes back, he could just focus on getting that footwork back and getting the muscle memory back going to the point where he is coming back in 2025, ready to be that guy. And I think it's a setback and it's unfortunate, and it's not better that he can't play, because he would have been in this season, I'm certain of it. It's just, it's not the worst thing in the world. As far as what he's going to be when he comes back, I mean, quarterbacks with no sample size, it's hard to know. I think he's going to be good right away in 2025. The team that they're going to be able to put around him, they could spend money on some guards. He is going to have the same receivers with Addison and Jefferson. They can add to that group if they want. We'll see what the backfield looks like. Kevin O'Connell, we'll see how he does with Sam Darnold. But I think that JJ McCarthy is going to be a good NFL quarterback on a playoff competing team right away, based on the sample size of seeing him this summer. Curtis says, do you think we found a long-term kicker? In training camp, yes. Actual games are different. In training camp, Will Reichard put on a show. And he's the best kicker that I've seen in training camp since starting to cover the NFL. He's had the best camp of any kicker I've seen. And I'm not even sure it was close. Even Carlson had a messy camp, which is one of the reasons that they cut him, was that his training camp was not all that great. But as far as what Reichard has done so far, he is on a different level than all the other kickers, the Greg Josephs, the Kai Forbaths. Even Dan Bailey did not really wow you in a training camp. And Will Reichard has wowed us in training camp. That doesn't mean a thing because they're going to play the real games. But I do think they have their kicker. If he's going to be Justin Tucker, that's what's hard to say. If he's going to kick 30 field goals this year, does he make 27 or 24? I mean, who knows, right? That's the difference between a great kicker and an average kicker. Is he going to make 20? Probably not. But is it going to be 24? Is it going to be 27? That I'm not sure. I lean toward he's going to be one of the maybe top 10 kickers in the league, but this is only off of practice and maybe just seeing anyone kick really good. You get like, whoa, okay, you got some. I don't know. Digit says, to get your future quarterback and star defensive end in the draft, says worlds about Kwesi re-up. I'm sold on KOC. Yeah. Giving them extensions is something that I'm for, just because I want them to be able to see this through. We have to see the plan totally come to fruition, and they have to win games before we really know. They've got to get to the playoffs. They've got to compete for Super Bowls. That all has to happen. But if we talk about how they executed this entire thing roster-wise, and all the areas that they are improved from last year and where they were 2 years ago, and having someone like McCarthy at this moment, it looks like they got the right pick with JJ McCarthy. We'll see what Dallas Turner becomes. Not crowning. We don't crown here. We'll see what Dallas Turner becomes, but I've been sold on the overall approach, but the hard part comes next. It's the easier part to take things out, the older guys, and then draft someone high and start the rebuilding process with some big signings. But getting from that, hey, you're a team that's kind of in the middle and is interesting with your future young quarterback, to, hey, you're an actual Super Bowl contender, that's a hard jump to make, and they won't be a success until they do it. So when I talk about defending Kwesi adofo-mensah's moves from the people who are like, do you remember the one draft that went wrong? Like that's a different discussion from how we will ultimately determine this thing, which is whether they win playoff games. But it doesn't take too much actual effort to look at the entire context and the entire picture of what they've been doing here to see that they're in a good spot now to eventually get there. But they have to get there in order for this to be a success. It doesn't mean Super Bowl, but it means they have to have built a serious contender next year, 2026, beyond that, in order for everything that they've done to be successful. Getting what they got early returns from JJ McCarthy helps ease that a lot, because if he looked really bad in training camp, or he just didn't seem to be acting professional or something like that, if that's how it had gone instead of how it did go, which was the best case scenario, then we might have a little more, okay, what are they going to do here? But the plan becomes very clear when JJ McCarthy is looked as good as he did. Janet says Aaron Jones is going to be the difference maker to help Darnold take this team to the playoffs. Very well could be. And if Aaron Jones is a top 10 running back in yards per attempt and total yards, they have a great chance to be in the playoffs. He is a driver of an offense, and you saw the way Jordan Love played off of him. It's not likely a coincidence that Jordan Love played as well as he did, as Aaron Jones was playing as well as he did last year for the Packers. Dystopian Utopia, good to see you. Says if the defense gets to top 10 territory, this team could surprise a lot of people. I agree with that. If you go into each game feeling like, hey, this other team is better on paper and has higher expectations and is just considered a Super Bowl contender like the 3 or 4 or 5 teams that they play to start the season after the Giants, if you have a top 10 defense, then every week you go into that game. Think about the Raiders last year. What did they finish with? 8 wins? Who was playing quarterback? But they had a good defense. If you have a good defense, you have a good shot on a weekly basis to play with anybody. It just lowers the offensive ceiling of the other team. It means you don't have to necessarily score 30 points to beat them. Buster says a top 10 defense would be refreshing. Yeah, I mean, so 18 and 19 defenses were good. They were not great, but they were good. 2020, 2021, 2022 were a nightmare. And then last year, for a minute there, they were flirting with top 5 to 7, and then it fell apart at the end of the season, and they end up being average. Even average was refreshing in comparison to what they were, 2-3 years ago. And that just, it shows you how tough it can be to rebuild that defensive roster. And that's why the signings that they made this season, all being multi-year contracts, was important, because they have to keep some of these players together for multiple seasons. Let's see. Derek says someone's website rated Darnold 32 among starting quarterbacks only because there couldn't be 33. I'll give him a chance because we have no choice. Here's what I would say to look back at. And I'm not saying he won't be the 32nd ranked quarterback. He might go out and throw 17 picks and 8 touchdowns, and this is a nightmare. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's in the range of possibilities. If you were a person whose job it was to power rank stuff, first of all, may God have mercy on your soul. That sounds horrible, by the way. I could not do that. I could not be a guy whose job it was to power rank quarterbacks and football teams. That just sounds so boring, but that doesn't matter. I like reporting on stuff and talking with you guys. I don't know how people power rank things, but anyway, where would you put Sam Darnold? I mean, I wouldn't have necessarily 32 because we have to consider the context here, but I probably wouldn't have him in the top 15, 17, because you have to go based on his history. If you're looking at it from our perspective, then you could see a little bit clearer what Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson can do for a quarterback. But also, if you're the power ranking man, and that's what you do, then if you put Sam Darnold as the 15th best quarterback because you think that Jefferson's going to help him, then everybody on the internet's going to roast you for putting him too high because his stats are so bad in the past. So you put him 32nd. But go back and look at wherever they power ranked quarterbacks from last year. I mean, tell me if it matches up with what actually happened. Where did they have Baker last year? Where did they have Stroud last year? This is why I say, I can't wait to play the games, because then we start to find all this stuff out and it's not just guessing anymore. Sean says, we saw Brandel play only one drive in the preseason. For people who saw practices, how did you value his play? Yeah, I thought the joint practices were tough on everybody because Cleveland has an unbelievable defense and their defensive line is just absolute monsters. That was tough to get a read on. The second day, they were much better. Brandel, we have 500 snaps of him playing in the league. And what I've seen from him of playing those games, and he hasn't played left guard, and then combined with the practices that we've watched, he can play at, I think, a mediocre level. So think about the levels that we've seen through the years. Josh Klein was the mediocre guard, and below him was the Dakota Dozier that it was a rough ride and you never knew what was going to happen. And below that is the TJ Clemmings, the Drew Samia, the watch your neck because that guy can't block anything. We already know that Brandel is not that guy, that he's better than a Dakota Dozier, that he's better than a Drew Samia. Is he in the range of that Josh Klein? That's where I think he'll be, which is a guy who mostly does his job and sometimes he doesn't, and you can work around it. It's not catastrophic. He's never been catastrophic in 500 snaps. But is it going to be a needle mover where you're saying, well, this dude is just plowing people and he is way above average? He's not a good enough athlete for that. He's big, but he's not the dudes who end up with 90 PFF grades that are just body movers and never get beat are usually Trent Williams or Christian Darrisaw or Quentin Nelson, the freak athletes. But everybody else is in that middle range. When you look at PFF grades, it's remarkable how few great guards there are, how few are really needle movers. Can you get competent in there? Can you communicate with each other? These last couple of years, it's felt like, and Reisner did a good job with this, I thought, last year in Pass Pro, but it was, can you guys work with each other on a stunt or on a blitz? That was a problem in 2022. And that got better last year and was probably one of the reasons that they graded well by PFF, because they did do a better job. And they also do have Reisner in their back pocket. If Brandel doesn't work out, Reisner does one thing well, but that one thing is important, and that's pass protect. Matthew says, who on the defensive interior could probably surprise or break out? In your opinion, who could you see exceeding expectations or making a jump? On the interior of the defensive line, specifically, Jerry Tillery is the guy who has caught my eye quite a bit in training camp. He's a massive dude. And when mixed with Harrison Phillips, who, remember, when he signed, he had a good history as a run stopper. I thought that combination looked pretty good to me, with even when they played their base package and they had Jonathan Bullard, Harrison Phillips, and Jerry Tillery, that they played off each other pretty well. And one thing that they do is create lanes for blitzers. Against Cleveland, we just saw some wide open blitzers where it's Jonathan Bullard or Harrison Phillips moving a body, taking the guard and turning him to create that lane or pushing him a certain direction. They're pretty good at that. And Tillery can beat people. He's a really good athlete. That's why he was a first-round pick. And if he gives them what he gave the Raiders last year, which was situational rushing, he could be better than we expect. It could be a little bit of a swing player in there. He's not Chris Jones. He's not Aaron Donald, but they didn't have this player at all last year. As far as who I could see making the jump or exceeding expectations, that's on the defense. There's just so many veterans. Like, who do you go with there? I don't know if there is one on defense aside from, well, obviously Dallas Turner is a rookie. So can he make a jump mid-season? Maybe the extra receivers, the Tristan Jackson, Trent Sherfield, Jalen Naylor, somebody, one of those three guys step up. If one of those three guys steps up, then they'll have a much better passing game. If one of them does break out, I just don't know which one. I kind of think Sherfield's going to play more than we think, that he might be out there a lot. Derek says Darnold has talent. He just gets jittery and makes bad choices when pressured. Quick passing game would benefit him, although KOC doesn't have a lot of quick hitters. Right. And that's what we're talking about with the adjustment. So where Kirk Cousins was great was if somebody runs a 15-yard pattern breaking across the middle, and it needs a little bit of anticipation and accuracy and good timing right out of the break, he throws it out in front of the guy, runs into the ball and catches it. He was good at that. He was very good at that. I don't know that that's Darnold's thing exactly. Is he going to live on swing passes to Aaron Jones and bombs to Justin Jefferson? You got to be more than that. But I don't know that it's going to be the same sort of timing stuff. Quick hitters, can he do that well? Carolina tried that and it worked okay with him. I mean, that was really Carolina's strategy in 2022 when he was better. It was short, and then it was, here we go, deep down the field. They might do it somewhat more that way than they would have with Kirk. Todd says, I can't wait to see your unfettered optimism shattered by what this team actually is. Whoa, unfettered optimism. That is the first time anyone has described me that way. Once the inevitable injuries hit, this team will collapse like a house of cards. Well, Todd, you are the life of the party here. But when you say unfettered optimism, as Manny and I talk about a team maybe getting to 9-8, it's sort of funny, right? I think that they have a lot of things going for them on this roster. And I also think that the injuries last year had that effect more than they should this year. So just even if you go position by position, of course, if you lose Jefferson, of course, if you lose Addison at any point or the offensive tackles, it's tough. You have to have your star players. That goes for everyone. But even having a Dallas Turner as your third pass rusher and not having to play Patrick Jones all the time, even Jihad Ward has some history of playing a lot in the NFL. Having Jerry Tillery as an extra guy in the interior, Kamu Grugier-Hill has played a lot in the NFL at linebacker. You're not having to call Anthony Barr. Fabian Morrow, they bring him in as a veteran guy who's played a lot of football. The safety position, having Theo Jackson emerge. I think that the depth of this team is better than it was last year. It's not, nobody, we've said this. Nobody's crowning anybody. And unfettered optimism is more of what we're trying to figure out is what's the path to them being a playoff team? And how likely is it that Sam Darnold could have this year that a lot of people think he can have, including NFL executives and Mike Sando's QB tiers piece? I did a whole podcast on it, how people in the league think he could be a third tier, which is good, a third tier quarterback if things go right with O'Connell. So I don't think it's quite unfettered. I mean, there's fettering. There's fettering to the optimism. I don't even know what fettering is. Maybe it's bad. I don't know. It sounds like you want your optimism with no fettering. So I'm fettering the optimism. Put it that way. Mike says, most excited for the franchise as a whole. Feels like all the pieces top to bottom are coming together. And that's what is interesting about this season the most is when you get to the end of it, do you still say that? Do you still feel that way? That the pieces are starting to come together? Is that the case in week 17? Will you still make that statement? I'm sure we'll be around to talk about it and we can have that discussion. Do we feel like the pieces are there to go into the future and have this team be a legitimate contender? Because I don't think it takes a lot of effort to see that off in the distance. You don't have to have, what is the thing that looks into space? You know, you look down into it. What is that called? You don't have to have one of those. You don't have to see into space to figure out why this team could be very good into the future. Let's see if we still feel that way. Because if Darnold plays well, then we're going to believe more in O'Connell. And if other players emerge, like younger players who they've drafted, like Ivan Pace, if Jordan Addison has another good season or even takes a step forward. I didn't mention him as a step forward guy, but he could be. And the pieces largely stay in place. And then you can add $40 or $50 million of spending and a young quarterback to the mix. Again, it's not that hard to see. Like, you don't need a PhD to figure out that a lot of teams have used this exact same strategy. But if a lot goes wrong, then we might not feel the same by the end of the season. Oh gosh, says, thinking about doing fantasy football this year. Do you have any recommendations on what apps to use? Why, yes, I do. Our friends at Underdog Fantasy. And remember that promo code PURPLE. And if enough of you use it, I get a bonus. So there you go. Underdog Fantasy, sponsor of the show. I got to figure out, maybe I can come up with some sort of reward for signing up and using the promo code PURPLE. But I got to think of something that wouldn't bankrupt me to give you if you sign up. Let's see. Derek says Brock Purdy will show his Mr. Irrelevant level skill set finally. The car he's driving needs maintenance. Well, it's not the same as last year. The running back is a year older. Christian McCaffrey coming off of an incredible MVP caliber season. Running backs after seasons where they carry the bleep out of the ball, not always historically great, right? After that. And this whole thing with Brandon Ayuk, he misses all of training camp. Is he going to start slow because he missed training camp? Some guys who have sat out will pull hamstrings and stuff like that. Like, we don't know what their health is going to be like after going to the Super Bowl. That's such a long journey. And sometimes teams come out flat after that. Dystopian Utopia says Rodgers is going to suck Jets will implode as usual. It's a pretty safe Jets guess historically, is that that's what's going to happen. I have a family member who is a Jets fan, and I probably mentioned this on the show before, that in the middle of the summer last year, after they signed Aaron Rodgers, emailed me and said, Aaron Rodgers will get hurt and we're going to be horrible next year. This is in June. And then week 1, he gets hurt. And I'm like, what? And I sent him an email back and said, how the heck did you know? And he just said, like, 50 years of watching the Jets. So you guys aren't the only ones that do that. You guys do it with kickers. Jets fans do it with quarterbacks, I guess. Matt says, best rookie head coach. Let me look at my football team list and think who would be the best. Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo might be a good coach, but I don't think that team's going to be very good. Who else are the new coaches in the league? Harbaugh. He's not a rookie, but new coach. Is it just me, or is there not a ton of them? Tennessee, Brian Callahan. How about that? How about Tennessee? Tennessee might be one of those teams where we all just go, what? They're going to be terrible. They're going to draft number 1. And then they totally surprise us because their coach is good. Coming from that offense in Cincinnati, I like Zach Taylor a lot as a coach. He could be, I think, pretty good there. If Will Levis can play. I don't know if Will Levis can play, but they added a lot of talent to that team this offseason, and it could be just the overlooked team, maybe like the Bucks were last year a little bit, the overlooked team that no one cares about. And you go, wait a minute, they're in the playoff race? Indianapolis was a little bit that way last year. Who else is new? Washington's got a new coach. You can't go down from where they were. Cannot go down from their previous coach. Ron Rivera was just all sorts of washed. So it should be better there, but Dan Quinn's not a rookie coach. There's not that many. There's not that many brand new coaches in the NFL this year. Dave Canales, Carolina. I would nominate Carolina. Raheem Mostert, or not Raheem Mostert. That's a running back. Raheem Morris has coached before in the league, but not in a long time. In Atlanta, could be pretty good. I like Canales in Carolina, because when you're that bad and then you add a bunch of players, Deontay Johnson's maybe one of the most underrated players in the league for wide receivers. And when you add offensive line, I mean, that's what Bryce Young really needed. He needed offensive line. Last year, their offensive line was so atrocious. If I saw a clip that was going viral today where it's a Patriots fan and he's saying in the classic Patriots, Boston accent, we need to get an offensive line before we get a quarterback. I'm not going to make fun of the guy and try the accent, but now I don't agree with that. If you draft number 3, you got to get Drake May, but wait till you have an offensive line to play him. Having an offensive line in front of your rookie quarterback is such a big deal. And the Vikings being able to at least put something in front of Darnold that's competent with good tackle play is really important, because the top thing that these young quarterbacks have to adjust to is how fast the game is. And even with someone like Justin Fields, there was that whole scenario. What if the Vikings had picked Justin Fields? And my thought was, well, he might have figured out how to get rid of the ball a little bit better, because he was just holding on to it. They had a bad offensive line the whole time, and it was getting him banged up. And young quarterbacks and bad offensive lines are such a terrible combination. And it was last year with Bryce Young. It'll be better this year. And even if they won 7 games, that would be so much better than where they were last season. So I think they can do that, at least be competitive. It's not a great division. Anthony says Rams are a fun long shot. Matthew Stafford, Josh Allen, Justin Jefferson, more wide receivers. Oh, are his MVP favorites, are your MVP favorites. So Stafford had a great season last year, not as statistically great as some before, but he played really well from what I saw. If Allen gets the Bills to 12 wins again or something, he could win MVP. I don't think that a wide receiver is going to win MVP. Mahomes, though, with more. Oh, I see what you're saying. With Mahomes, with more wide receivers, Mahomes has a great chance to bounce back to a huge statistical season. Rams are a team that you would be, I think, not shocked if they were one of those surprised, like, whoa, the Rams won 12 again. Anytime a team has a coach that is as good as Sean McVay and a quarterback on Stafford's level, who I think has become a much better decision maker, it's almost like as his speed and mobility has reduced, he's become a better complete quarterback because he's relying more on making the right decisions as opposed to, hey, I've got the arm talent. Hey, I can scramble. And that's how he took all those sacks all the time. I used to view Stafford and Cousins as similar caliber type of quarterbacks who were really flawed. Now, they were played different, but they were flawed, but they could have their great moments and they could have their down moments. And the down moments of Matthew Stafford over the last couple of years have reduced while he's been in LA. And hey, maybe there's a coach who used to be in LA that could reduce some wild play of Sam Darnold. I don't know. Maybe. Jared says, I simmed the Madden season last night, set Darnold as the starter, even though the computer wanted JJ to start. Everyone wanted JJ to start, even the computer. He threw for around 3,100 yards, 23 touchdowns, 16 picks, and they went 8-9. I could see it. More yards than that for me, but I could see it. That's not a crazy season to project from Sam Darnold for Madden, and 8-9 is not a crazy record. It will be a success if we're talking about the last couple weeks playoff scenarios. That means a lot of things will have gone right for everybody. Steven says the Vikings have beaten the 49ers the last 4 times in Minnesota, and I've been to all 4. Do I go to week 2? I think you have to. It's analytics, Steven. You have to go. And just Vikings San Francisco, what an awesome matchup of uniforms and players. The star talent, the amount of Pro Bowlers on the field with the 49ers, the Vikings. I mean, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's good football. I'm pumped for that. Steven says, how do we feel about Kene Nwangwu not passing his physical? I was not shocked. I was a little surprised, I would say, but he had this back injury last year. And sometimes guys who are that fast are like that they just get hurt. And that may have been a factor for why they released him, is that they were concerned with this new kickoff. Because one thing that I've heard about the new kickoff and observed is it's safer for some people and not for others. And I think the kick returner, it's not safer. The kick returner is getting blasted a lot of times. If people break through and they're hitting the guy, he's trying to go this way and he's trying to hit a hole, but somebody can blindside him. I think Malik Knowles may have gotten hurt on this kick returning. I've seen some other guys get hurt, some other returners. And if you have someone that doesn't have a toughness element, it might hurt you now with the return, as opposed to it being a track play before, which is what Kene Nwangwu was good at. That may have all gone into it. Rob says Brandel looked decent in the Raiders and Lions game. I assume you mean from last year. Strong missed the timing a bit, should improve with practice. Vikings outrushed the Raiders and Lions in those games. Yeah, there was a few plays in the Raiders game where I went, there was a time where he was pulling and he just completely whiffed on the guy. He is not the most agile person because he's humongous and he was a tackle. And I think that there's a limitation on how good he could be, but solid would be good. And I've said this many times on the show over the years, and I strongly believe it. Average is great. Blake Brandel's not going to get you to the Super Bowl, but you need him to be average because bad will kill you. How much bad you have on your team is often what determines your record. You got to have greatness always to go to the Super Bowl, but it's also about the weakest points as much as it is about the strongest points. So don't be the weakest point. Isaac says they'll finish 7-10. Could see it. A lot has to go right there. Thaddeus points out that fetters are chains and restraints. So my alleged optimism was very fettered. I mean, if I'm talking about 9-8, that's a fettering. That's very restrained. That's not unfettered as far as the optimism goes. I feel like that's this whole conversation we're all having, is we're all restraining from saying, oh man, Darnold is going to win MVP and he's going to go to the Super Bowl and it's going to be unreal. If we were in some markets, this Vikings fans, I think, are very good at being realistic with things because you've been punched in the face so many times. But there are some fan bases who would hear nothing except for that, right? They would be convinced fully that they're going to the Super Bowl. Pittsburgh is like this. They're convinced there that Russell Wilson is going to take them there. And if it's not him, it's Justin Fields. So I actually think the fettering has been fantastic. You guys have been very realistic. Matt and Diana says, I have noticed that things in football can be ironic. Yes. Just like US Cellular asking you not to use your phone because of us mode. That's the joke. What could be ironic in our game versus the Giants? Ooh, that's a good question. What would be an ironic thing to happen in the game against the Giants? First thing that comes to mind, because we were talking about Wongwu, is that the game is entirely determined on kick returns. We go through all this stuff. We talk about how are they going to block the defensive tackle and the matchup of Malik Neighbors against Stephon Gilmore. And then the game ends up 10-3 and it's won on a kick return. That would be ironic. If truly, because I like to use the word ironic as of what it means, which is unexpected. Because I wasn't sure about the unfettered, but I know what ironic is. And ironic means unexpected. The unexpected outcome is that it's a freaking shootout, that Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold are just firing left and right. It's 320 yards, 3 touchdowns against 298 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks from either guy. Jefferson and Malik Neighbors combined for the most yards for 2 opposing receivers in history. And we've got ourselves a 43-38 game between Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones. Now that would be ironic. Let's see. Let me scroll a little bit more. We have well cleared the 2-hour mark. That's how excited you guys are about football, and still big audience here. Really, really appreciate that. Preston, any comments about Hall signing in Seattle? Yeah, at the beginning of the show, I talked about it a little bit, and it's just, and I mean this with all respect to Jaren Hall. It's okay. It's all right. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Is my camera out of focus? What did you mean, mine or Manny's? I can't tell by looking at myself. Preston says my camera's out of focus. You have to let me know if it is, or it's I try, but I'm not an expert in that in the audio video. I've tried to bring you the best I can. Let's see. Anthony says rookie quarterbacks need a running game. If we can grow and expand our run game this season. No, that's a good point. This is a good point. In terms of how 41-0. That, yes, the ironic result, Brett, is 41-0. Yes, 100% against the Giants. That's the right answer. You win on that one. As far as the running game, if they can put together a good running game, that would be big for the future. Even if, you're not going to have Aaron Jones forever, that would be really big for the future, because that means they are capable of doing it. And so far we've thought that they were not really capable of doing it. And that over the last 2 years. Let's see. Okay. So it seems to be focused on the mic. Really? So am I not close enough? You think if I got a little closer, would that do it? Am I clearer now if I'm a little closer? I've been kind of just sitting back, so maybe I had set it earlier to be like this. This looks clear on my end. Maybe that's a little better. Why didn't you guys tell me earlier? Is that better? That's better. Okay, so I had it set. Okay, well, I appreciate that. That's good feedback. Okay, I will make this my spot, because I tend to, when we're just talking football, I tend to kind of kick my feet back and lean back, and I never think that the camera might be not adjusting or something. Anyway, so yeah, Preston letting me know 2 hours and 12 minutes into the show. I'm going to need you to be there promptly when we start next time to check the AV. Anyway, I've finally reached the bottom of the comments section. You guys are great tonight. Absolutely phenomenal. I can sense your excitement, just like I hope you could sense mine, because we finally got football. It's been a really, really long off season. Great to have Manny back in the mix. Keep in mind the lineup that we have going forward here. Jeremiah Searles and I, we usually record in the middle of the day, Tuesday, and then run it on YouTube later on in the evening. Brian Murphy is up right now on the YouTube page. And let's see, Wednesday, we'll do another chat Wednesday evening. Thursday, I'm going to be doing a show with Andrew Kramer again. That's awesome. We did that last year where we previewed the game. Manny's coming on Thursday as well. We'll get other guests that we'll mix in. It's going to be great. So thank you all so much for watching/listening. And I look forward to doing this leading up to the game. We'll get some hardcore analysis into the game. We'll get injury report on Wednesday. That will provide a lot. Jeremiah Searles returns to the show. I know a lot of you want to grill him on what he thinks of JJ McCarthy because he didn't want the Vikings to draft him. So lots to do here. And I'll just put Hunter up on the screen there. Football is so back. I agree. Thanks, everybody, for the really fun chat tonight. And we will catch you all very soon. You know what it is. Football